On this episode of the Haunted Objects podcast,
they apparently made him ejaculate without an erection,
Yes.
which sounds terrible. They put like a little suction cup on him.
No.
I think there was even a report that was done that says that he had ejaculated, but there was no erection.
And there were genital warts.
from deep inside the mysterious archives of the Newkirk Museum of the Paranormal, it's the Haunted Objects podcast.
We've done a lot of experiments with hypnosis.
Yes.
We've used hypnosis to induce alien abduction
Yes.
experiences more than once.
Yeah.
We've played with hypnosis for paranormal experiments.
Mhm.
You yourself have never been hypnotized.
No, I don't think I have. I don't have a memory of being hypnotized.
Oh, that's
Isn't that part
interesting.
of it, though? Like,
That's interesting.
maybe I have been. I just don't remember.
Do you think that you're susceptible to hypnosis? Or I should say, do you think you're a good candidate? Because hypnotists don't like it when you use the word susceptible.
Yes.
They want to say whether you're a good candidate for hypnosis.
Okay. Yes,
Why do you say that?
because I believe I'm quick to believe, and I think that hypnosis would work very well on me.
Do you want to find out?
Yes. So what are you going to do to me?
Stage hypnotists use this all the time to
Okay.
find the person who they can induce the fastest.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you need one of your arms. Just put your arm out like this. You can try this at home if you want.
Okay.
Close your eyes. Just close your eyes. It's fine. I'm not going to do anything to you. I promise. And what I want you to do is I want you to imagine that there's a little bit of thread that's around your wrist. And then notice that it's got a buoyancy to it because it's tied to a balloon. You can feel the buoyancy. You feel it tugging your arm, moving upwards, slower and slower, kind of waving side to side. It almost feels good. It's like your arm is weightless. It's like you could just float away. Your arm could just float away. Up, up, up. So comfortable. It feels so nice. You've got this weighted balloon just floating your arm up. Okay, open your eyes. Yeah, you'd go fast.
I don't like. I was fighting it too. That's
Were
the
you
first
fighting
time.
it? You were fighting it because it was me.
No,
Yes.
I'd fight it because I don't want anyone in my brain.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but I think our brains are far more susceptible than we think they are. I'd be interested to see how many people at home had the same kind of experience.
Yeah.
They usually keep that going for a couple minutes,
Oh,
and some people, their arms are like way up in the air.
Okay.
And you know, like, oh, you're gonna go to sleep.
How much did
fast.
mine go up? Like,
A lot.
okay.
30 degrees, maybe.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't like that.
So you'd be a really good candidate for hypnosis, which is great because that means that we can recover all of your memories of being abducted by aliens.
Yes. No, I don't. Listen, if you find anything out, I don't want to hear about it. You can know about it, but I don't want to know about it.
We're going to talk a lot about hypnosis, and we're going to talk about its use and arguably popularization in the most famous alien abduction case of all time. Because today, we're talking about a dress that was inside a flying saucer.
While driving through the desolate White Mountains of New Hampshire on a cool September night, Betty and Barney Hill encountered something not of this world. After spotting a strange light in the sky, the Hills experienced 2 hours of missing time, awakening in another part of the state, disheveled and confused. Through a series of hypnotic regressions, the couple began to recall the frightening memories they'd lost. They'd been kidnapped by humanoid beings from another planet and forced to endure painful medical examinations aboard their spacecraft. Why were the Hills chosen for this extraterrestrial experimentation? These small scraps of Betty's purple dress, worn during the event and stained by the oily hands of her captors, may hold the answers to history's most famous alien abduction.
We were talking about this case a little earlier, and I realized that the craft that they are describing and all the drawings of this craft look a lot like the UFOs that Adamski was photographing. There's a guy, a contactee by the name of George Adamski. He was photographing UFOs that look just like this at the Palomar Observatory out in California 10 years earlier. In fact, actually, hang on.
Do you have a picture?
Yeah,
of
hang
one?
on a second. I have them here in the office. You can see it looks like it has little windows in it.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. George Adamski was a fraud. But it is interesting to me that what they saw was something that was already in the public consciousness.
Yes, it was already existing there.
As this thing got closer and closer, they realized that the little men, or at least Barney said the little men, he described them looking like Germans.
Betty was still in the car, and he was standing with the binoculars looking at them. And Betty couldn't really see what was going on inside because the overhead light was still on inside the car. So she didn't really know what was happening outside of the car. And Barney was standing there with his binoculars watching them. And the one that was intensely looking at him was really focused, and somewhere in his mind was telling him, keep looking at me, keep paying attention to me.
That.
Almost as if like the act of like saying that was putting Barney into like a hypnotic state. Like
Right.
kind of just, he said he couldn't, I remember reading that he said he couldn't move. He was like finding himself becoming kind of frozen to the spot, just standing there looking through the binoculars.
Betty and Barney freak out. They start screaming. They run back to the car.
Yeah.
And the next thing that they remember is they hit some sort of a roadblock, and then all of a sudden it took them 2 hours more than they thought to get home.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of my favorites is that they couldn't tell like what time it was because both their watches stopped
Yeah.
working.
Oh, right.
And they were
Uh-huh.
like, what's going on? And they got home and the sun was just starting to peek out because it was like 5 something in the morning. But Barney thought they should have been home at about like 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So something didn't add up.
Yeah.
Here we've got the watches that don't work, classic abduction stuff,
I don't-
classic close encounter electromagnetic interference.
Yes. I don't even think that they brought their clothes into the house. I think they left their suitcases out on their patio because they felt weird about it.
We've driven through the White Mountains during that same time period,
Sure.
during the fall, in the middle of the night. And if we experienced something like that in that place,
Mhm.
I would be so deeply unsettled because it's kind of middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
There's not a whole lot going on out there.
Yeah, it's already creepy on its own. You feel really isolated. You definitely, like, especially November, October, like September, those months are creepy. It's eerie. It's weird. It feels, like you said, very isolated. And yeah, even just that alone would be scary.
After the event,
Mm-hmm.
they start telling some friends what has happened to them. Betty starts to read books on UFOs. Barney started to suffer from extreme anxiety. They knew that something bad had happened, but they couldn't recall what it was.
Mhm.
And obviously they were experiencing missing time.
Yeah.
One of their friends suggested Barney and Betty go under regression hypnosis.
Yes.
Nothing like this had quite been done before. This was the first time that someone who was abducted by aliens had really gone under hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
It did not go well.
No.
No. They had a bad time.
I mean,
Both of them.
you can listen to the recordings of this session where they
very
start
scary.
to regurgitate these experiences that they had locked away, allegedly.
Mhm.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
They're terrifying.
Yeah, they definitely are.
Barney is screaming
Yeah.
and crying. Betty is having needles stuck into her navel
Yeah.
and screaming. They were so unsettling that the hypnotist had to pull them out.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't believe in any of this stuff. Like, he
Mm.
wasn't a believer in UFOs. He just thought that they had some kind of a shared trauma. Because the stories that came out of this were so sensational, eventually one of their friends leaked the story to a writer who ended up putting it in a newspaper.
Yes.
They didn't want to tell anyone.
It was something that neither of them, being, big parts of their community and people who sort of were worried that this would really reflect badly on them in their community. They were very concerned about that information getting out to the general public and being sensationalized.
Well, because they were both very upstanding members of
Yeah.
their community.
Yes.
Betty worked with like the child welfare services.
Yeah.
Barney worked at the post office, and they were very like this was the height of the civil rights movement.
Yes.
And they were an interracial couple.
Yeah.
So, he was working with the NAACP.
Mm-hmm.
They were well respected.
Yes.
And they were afraid that if this story got out, they were going to lose their jobs. They were going to become the mockery of their town. Who knows? I'm sure Barney was nervous about the kind of damage that could do to the civil rights movement that he was so involved with.
Yes.
I mean, they were like super involved. Like they were like invited to Johnson's presidential inauguration.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So
they were
this
so involved.
it shows like how serious these people were. These weren't just cranks.
Yes.
They weren't people that anyone would imagine would make up a crazy story like this, especially one with such embarrassing details.
Yes.
There's a joke about alien abductions that exist to this day. It's that the aliens put stuff in your butthole.
Mm-hmm.
Barney is arguably the reason
Maybe.
that exists, that meme is a thing.
Yeah.
Because that's what they did to him.
Yeah. They did a lot of things to poor Barney.
They did a lot of things.
They did a
to
lot
him.
of things. They did a lot of things to both of them.
That's true. But I think Barney, he definitely got the short end of the stick on that one because oh boy. They apparently made him ejaculate without an erection, which
Yes.
sounds terrible. They put like a little suction cup on him.
No.
I think there was even a report that was done that says that he had ejaculated, but there was no erection.
And there were genital warts.
There were genital warts
yes.
in a ring.
Yes.
From
From the suction thing.
they put stuff in his butthole.
Yeah. They scraped him. They poked him. They took samples.
I remember that the little aliens were obsessed with his dentures. They pulled his dentures out and they didn't understand them.
Yeah.
Um,
They put a very, very like long needle in Betty's belly button, her navel, and it for obvious reasons it hurt really bad, and she started screaming and was really upset. And then the one that they called, I think they called him the leader.
oh yeah, they had different names that
Yeah.
they gave them.
It like waved its hands over her eyes and made the pain go away. But they said that they were like doing a pregnancy test, which is hilarious because
Straight in the belly button.
yeah, like
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly where babies are
it's what a
from.
little kid would do. Be like, that's where babies come from. You know what I mean? Like that's
There's
not what
easier
you're
ways
doing.
to get in there, guys.
Yeah, like you don't have to. That's just so
Well,
random.
maybe
and
they didn't know
hilarious.
because they were from another planet.
Yeah,
They were
apparently.
aliens. They didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, they did a lot. They took like samples of skin. Betty said that they scraped her skin with like a thing, and like they took samples of earwax and all sorts of just bodily fluids. They were really interested in collecting this data from them.
Barney had to be dragged by the entities
Mm-hmm.
into the ship, which is really interesting because he found scuff marks on his shoes, which was very unlike him.
That's one of the other details that Barney talked a lot about was he was so scared he just didn't open his eyes.
yeah.
So he spent most of the abduction experience with his eyes closed because he was just too afraid to open them, which is, I mean, honestly, like their story is so upsetting. It's genuinely upsetting when like you actually look at the details of it because he was so frightened that like he could not open up his eyes because what was happening to him was so scary.
I mean, the recordings, the recordings of his regression session alone
it's
are
awful.
terrifying. They're
Yeah.
really hard to listen to.
Yeah.
Because you can tell that this man is re-experiencing
Yeah.
or believes he's re-experiencing something very painful and
Yes.
humiliating.
And this is also someone who had like been through World War II. Like
Yeah.
this is somebody who had experienced a lot of things within their lifetime. And it is, you're right. Like I've never listened to the audio recordings in full because it's genuinely very upsetting to listen to.
Apparently the one time that Barney tried to listen to the audio recordings because it was suggested to him that he do that to maybe help him because he necessarily might not remember the hypnosis as well. Like they played him out loud and he left the room like crying and threw up in the sink.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, he had an ulcer because of it from the stress of the whole experience. And like Barney took it, I think, in a lot harder than maybe Betty did.
We'll get into that
Yeah.
because they seem to have had much different reactions to
Sure.
their experiences. Betty, on the other hand, aside from the needle that
Mhm.
she had, seemed to have had fine experience. In fact, she said something about when she was talking to, I believe it was the leader, she called, because the other ones didn't speak English as well. They had some kind of a strange cadence to the way they talked. She described it as an accent. The leader made her feel better, and she had a rapport with him. And she specifically said, I felt like I made a new friend, which is a much better experience than what Barney was having in the next exam room.
Yeah, I really feel bad for Barney. I really do.
Do you want to see what the beings looked like? Remember the watercolor pictures?
So here's the thing. When I was a kid, one of my first real weirdo books was the Time Life Mysteries books. This image of the entities terrified me.
It's
it gave
scary.
me nightmares because it's not like the typical Greys exactly. God,
There's
look
the
at
leader.
that.
There's the leader.
That was painted by their friend, who was like a watercolor artist.
God, I hate it
Yeah,
so
He
much.
it's
sat
so
down with
scary.
them for like 5 hours, and they described them to him.
Would you say, I think, is it not believed that this is the first, like, reported images of, like, the Greys, like the classic Greys that we're so familiar with now in ufology?
It was the Examiner that bothered me.
Here, tag yourself. I'm the Examiner.
I'm the supervisor for sure. Just peeping around corners.
So am I the leader? Does that make you the leader?
Yeah.
You definitely have a supervisor vibe.
Yeah, I'm like always.
Yeah. You're always like peeking around corners. I think the supervisor painting is
going
the
on here?
closest that we've seen to this point of what a Grey is.
Yeah,
when you look at it.
The eyes are so much different because like we're so used to the traditional, just the dark kind of glossy eyes that to see almost like pupils in them and then like irises seems really strange to imagine them that way. If you were to say to me when I was 10, what do aliens look like? I would have just thought all aliens were just Greys.
Right. But then I see this in this book, and it's striking because it looks very human-ish.
Yeah, it definitely has those human. I mean, again, we're so used to those big glossy eyes, and to see like an iris, to see like almost sort of like our eyes, it is very, very creepy depiction.
Very unsettling.
Yeah.
And they look wrong.
They look scary.
This is like Betty's literal description. They were 4.5 to 5 feet tall, humanoid-like, very large eyes that slanted upward, a very flat nose, just a thin slit for a mouth, a grayish complexion, and they were all dressed alike.
Oh my goodness.
They had hair and hats.
Really, they had hair?
I've heard
One spoke and it was in English.
So I've heard two different versions of that. I've heard that before the hypnosis sessions, they saw them with hair, and capes was also the other thing.
Oh, interesting.
And then after, in the hypnosis session, I think that they didn't have hair, and they were wearing like black, like bodysuits almost, shiny, glossy bodysuits.
Right.
There's almost like 3 versions of this story. And that's why it's so hard to read about, because you don't know which one you're reading, but they all came from the same source. So there's like the initial sighting of the craft, and they didn't need hypnosis for that. They knew that they saw a UFO, and Barney walked out, like looked at it from the car and was like, there's like people in that. They remembered that even when they went home the first night, and he saw the beings. Betty didn't see the beings because she stayed in the car. And then there's Betty's nightmares description. And then there's the hypnosis description of like what happened to them.
Yeah. So was it the dream? I think in the dream, did she see them with hair and capes?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
They were a little friendlier too.
Yeah.
Everything was a little better in her dream.
Almost like her subconscious was trying to say like, hey, this wasn't so bad. This wasn't so bad. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
You're fine. You're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
You're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
Did they not talk to the Air Force in their area before the article even came out?
Yeah, they did. They did that like a few days afterward.
Okay.
Because they told their friend, and they were like, you need to report this to the Air Force. It's
That's
United States citizens.
Yeah.
So they reported the craft.
Okay.
Which makes sense to me. I mean, if you see some strange craft, why not tell the Air Force?
Yeah.
I mean, the Air Force is looking for that stuff. I'm convinced that part of the reason we have a UFO investigation unit and have for so many years, whatever the name keeps changing, Well, it's because, like, obviously, like, it could be a foreign threat.
Sure.
Like, you want to know. That's
Yeah.
worth reporting, especially if you're seeing crews that look like Germans.
Yeah, people wearing uniforms and yes.
Right after
get
World
it.
War II, like,
Uh-huh.
of course
Yeah.
you're going to report that.
So they did. They reported it a few days afterwards, which was good.
Their friend suggests, hey, why don't you go and have regression hypnosis? They do. They start to feel better, but this crazy story comes out. And then they find out that someone has printed their story
Mm-hmm.
in a local paper.
Yeah, that runs for 5 days straight.
They had to go out and find it and read it themselves because nobody told them.
Yeah.
Turns out I believe it was one of the guys from the Air Force leaked it, didn't he? At like a cocktail party or something, he told some writer who went and found all the details.
Yeah, that sounds right.
To try and get ahead of it,
Mm-hmm.
they hooked up with a writer by the name of John Fuller. They give John the hypnosis tapes so he can listen to those, and he ends up writing a book called The Interrupted Journey. There you go.
First edition.
This book becomes massively popular. They're interviewed everywhere. There's a feature-length film that's made. It stars James Earl Jones. He's
Mhm.
probably the most famous person in it. It's good, but it's not what you expect. It's very made-for-TV movie. It's more about their relationship than anything else.
Yeah.
And it's told very linearly where they have this thing, and then the scary stuff comes out during their hypnosis sessions.
Yeah, Barney did a game show.
Oh, yeah, we watched the game show that they
Mhm.
did.
They were doing like the media circuit back
Right.
in the day. And like you have to remember that at this point in time, obviously the internet is not around. This is a big deal because
Yeah.
it was difficult to ever get anything on TV at that point. So they were like immediately doing the media circuit and getting tons of attention because of it.
They wanted to do this because they needed to own their story.
Yes.
If they didn't come out and give their version of the story, I mean, they were getting all kinds of different ones. There were ones, I remember in Betty's self-published book, she talks about how Barney was listening to the radio one day and somebody said that Betty was locked up in a mental institution.
Yeah.
And so he called up and he's like, listen, that's not true.
Yeah.
She's here. She's fine. We're good. Then the person calls in again and does it again. Like he was going to get lawyers involved.
Yes. Yeah.
So they needed to do something where they owned the story.
Mhm.
It's too late now. It's
Yeah.
already embarrassing. It's
Mhm.
out there.
Mm-hmm.
Barney's got all these details out there about all the things that the aliens did to him.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine? Like, hi, I'm Barney. I'm Barney Hill. I work at the post office. I'm involved with the NAACP. Oh, you're the guy. The aliens put stuff up his butthole.
Yeah. They were the kind of people that would have lost things by talking publicly about this. They weren't going to gain anything from
Yeah.
sharing these stories publicly.
Yeah.
And so it almost lends so much more to the validity of their experience because they were not the kind of people who were lying about something to try to get on TV or get a book deal, or there were years involved in.
They had a lot to lose.
They had a lot to lose, and there was an extended period of time too. Like this didn't just happen, and then suddenly they were like, "Let's write a book. Let's go." There was at least 2 years between their abduction experience and their hypnosis session.
Yeah.
So there was an extended period of time there where they didn't really want to have anything. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to share it with anyone. They were very private with this information. And so in my mind, it lends a lot of credibility to their story because they, like you said, they had a lot to lose from telling the story publicly.
They have this terrible situation happen to them.
Yeah.
They choose, like, listen, we should just talk about this. It's the only way we can own the story. Maybe we'll make a little money on the book,
Mhm.
the film rights, whatever, to potentially offset us losing our jobs,
Yes.
losing our careers.
And allowing them to have, as you said, control over the narrative at that point because they were losing control of the narrative very
Right.
quickly.
Their hypnotist, Benjamin Simon, originally believed that it was some kind of a shared psychosis, that Betty had had a bad dream and that she had told Barney about it.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, Barney started to believe it. And that's what they were experiencing.
Yes, that they were having a shared experience, but that he believed that they both absolutely believed what they had gone through was a real thing for them.
If you want to know how serious this hypnotist was, Connor, you have a photo of this guy, don't you?
This is my dream. This is my dream photo.
This guy
It's gonna
has like one of the best headshots I've ever seen. I think we should recreate this headshot. Yeah, look at that guy.
All three of us need to recreate Dr. Benjamin Simon's awesome headshot. He's got the cigar. He's
Look
got
at
the
that.
Is that a cigar?
mustache.
That's a cigar, not a pen, right?
It's a cigar.
That's a cigar.
I really want people to know I smoke.
I'm a
Need to-
distinguished
That's
person.
cool.
Trim my mustache.
I love it. I don't care.
It was advertisements back then were saying you were cool if you smoked
Yeah,
cigarettes, though.
your dentist's
Cigars.
favorite cigarettes
That's right.
are.
This one's the most mild for my unborn child.
I just love it. I love that picture.
These
That's
pictures are all from the book that's by Betty and Barney's niece, which is a really good book.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Betty and
cover
Barney's
book.
niece. What was the title of the book?
Kathleen Marden.
Kathleen
Called
Marden.
Captured.
She worked with Stanton Freeman on that book,
Mhm.
didn't she?
Yeah.
She worked with
Nuclear
Stanford
physicist.
Mm-hmm.
Betty and Barney also have a granddaughter who fights in UFC.
Yeah,
She's like an MMA fighter.
she is.
She's a badass.
That's awesome.
In fact, as we're recording this, even today, as we were recording this, you saw her tweet.
Yeah, she literally tweeted a picture of Betty and Barney and their dog that she found in her mom's attic.
Their dog was with them, too.
Yes, I was very concerned about the dog the whole time because if I see a dog, yeah, a little wiener dog, and I was like, "This nothing bad ever happened to this dog." The dog was fine.
Dog was fine.
Yes.
But who knows? You can't do a regression hypnosis session on a dog.
No, you can't.
So who knows what
I don't
that
think you
dog
can.
experienced. There's actually a rich history of abductees having their dogs go to space with them.
Yeah.
Buck Nelson is
Mhm.
another guy who his dog went to space. I think his dog went to Venus.
It's awesome.
It's great.
That's cool.
Dogs deserve to go to space too. The idea of dabbling in regression hypnosis for this type of stuff was pretty new.
Yeah.
We know now, these days, regression sessions get pretty sticky.
Yes.
You can have false memories. That was another thing that even skeptics today like to point out, could be false memories. But there's so much strange evidence in their case that points to something physically happening.
Yes, I think so.
We can argue all day about what it was that happened, but something strange happened to the two of them in the White Mountains.
Yes. And then both of them experienced those memories not being there. And I was like,
Oh, God, that's scary.
yeah, like both of them had those memories wiped from their minds.
When they got done with the regression session, Betty recalled having seen some kind of a what the leader pointed out was a map
Yes.
that they used. And the hypnotist said, "Do you think you can draw it from memory?" And she drew this map, and the leader said that it was a star map.
Mm-hmm.
And it showed all of the places that they went to visit regularly, semi-regularly,
Mm-hmm.
and then there were dotted lines on the map, and that was those were expeditions that they were taking.
Yes.
Really fascinating that she would be able to draw this map. Come to find out, much later, there was I think it was an Ohio school teacher,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Marjorie Fish
Marjorie Fish, that's right.
in 1966.
She was an amateur astronomer, very, very smart woman. She was
Yes.
in Mensa.
Yeah.
She decided to get a hold of Betty and say, "Hey, can I see this map of yours?" And she put it together and found that it looks very close to a map of Zeti Reticuli,
Yes.
which Betty should not have known.
It
And
looks
that's-
really good.
It does
too.
look really good.
There are I have seen skeptical arguments against this, that we already knew where it was, that there were some models of it floating around out there.
Sure, could it have already been in Betty's mind and
Right.
she just sort of pulled the memory of it back out again?
But to reproduce it so well, Betty, there's no real reason Betty should have known. I don't think she wasn't really into
By memory,
astronomy,
too.
was she?
No.
No.
And like, how difficult would it be to even, like, for somebody to show you something on a map,
Yes.
and then 2 years later, for you to be like, I can draw that picture
Mhm.
exactly, which almost leads credence to the fact that like the hypnosis was a legit revisitation into that moment.
That's true. Yeah.
That's frightening.
It was like in Astronomy magazine, and then the guy who wrote the article in Astronomy magazine like had to leave his job like 3 months later because they thought it hurt their credibility. Talking
Oh.
about it.
Wow. Oh, that's sad.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Are there? There's got to be copies of this magazine out there still.
It's like a 1974 issue. I'm sure there are.
I would love to find a copy of that. and have that, especially if they made that guy leave.
Yeah.
Oh, that's stupid.
Yeah. Again, we're talking about earlier is a lot of these people had nothing to gain from telling these stories. They knew that they were going to be mocked and made fun of, and in many of these cases, literally fired from their jobs. So like it's one of the more interesting stories, really, specifically for the time period. Also,
the other thing is that the Air Force acknowledges now that there was an actual thing on their radar in that area around 2 a.m. when this was supposed to have taken place. I think that's relatively new information, is it not?
Yeah.
I think that came out in Kathleen Martin's book, did it?
Yeah, it might have been through Freedom of Information request, but like they documented an anomaly at, 2:13 in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
On that night. I mean,
something
maybe
strange.
There's anomalies every night. I don't know.
But the biggest piece of evidence that something strange happened to these two, or at least to Betty, was her dress. After the event, she takes her dress off and she puts it in her closet and notices, about a week later, 6 days, something like that, that there's a pink powder that has formed all over the dress. She takes the dress, she hangs it outside to air it out. The pink powder blows away, but she's found that it has stained her dress. There's permanent stains on it. Thank goodness she kept that dress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they were able to take that dress and send it out for chemical testing, for DNA testing. I think it's been tested at the time of this recording 5 times, something like that.
Different samples. And it didn't really start until 1977. Which is when she met this guy from the university who had connections to the University of Cincinnati chemistry department.
Oh, you know who that was?
Like, we should do that.
That guy that she met here in Cincinnati ran like the biggest UFO group in Cincinnati. I think they were called Orbit. Leonard Stringfield is his name.
Yeah.
Leonard Stringfield was the primary investigator of all the Loveland Frogman sightings back in the 50s. So he's the reason that we have Loveland Frogman. He also did like investigations into the Kentucky Goblins and stuff like that. He was a really, really cool guy. He did a lot of interesting stuff. So it's funny because I didn't know until recording this that he was involved in some way in the Hill case. Pretty neat. So they send these samples out numerous different times. I think the last time they sent them out was 2008?
Yeah, recent.
I think that's where our samples came from. Our friend Matt Moniz was one of the biochemists that was involved in testing this stuff. And they found some really weird stuff. It's inconclusive, as usually is in cases like this, but it is so strange. They found that most of the places where this strange powder had been were along her zipper.
Yeah.
And she specifically noted that the aliens had a hard time figuring out what the zipper was and how it worked.
Yeah.
And then around her armpits, where they would have been carrying her and moving her around. So it seems we can extrapolate, if we want to have fun, we can extrapolate that there was some substance on these entities'
skin, hands,
that made a strange growth grow all along the places they touched that dress.
Yeah.
That chemically altered that dress permanently. But they can't seem to figure out what this stuff was, can they?
No. And I tried to read the scientific reports. That's kind of above my head. So maybe if there's a listener that can help break it down, we can put like a link to a couple of the reports in the show notes.
Yeah.
But from what I can gather, it's inconclusive. I know I saw the words undetermined organic hydrocarbons. It's like, okay, there wasn't any weird DNA. Everything was expected, even like cat hair and stuff like that, because this just like sat in her closet for like 20 years.
Well, their story continues in a strange way because they start to have what sounds like almost Men in Black interference.
Yeah.
Are you in possession of a haunted object? An antique spiritualist tool? Wreckage from a crashed UFO? The Newkirk Museum of the Paranormal wants to add it to their archives. Whether your strange item is causing you paranormal problems or is simply a supernaturally significant relic worthy of curation, we want to hear from you. For more information on our acquisition process, visit paramuseum.com.
The Hills lived alone.
Mm-hmm.
No one else had a key to their apartment except for them. And yet they were finding strange things, like they would come home and all of the chairs in the house would be in one room in a circle.
That's so cool.
They came back to find a pile of leaves in the kitchen. And in these leaves were the earrings that Betty had been abducted in.
Yeah. The weird detail that I thought was interesting was that she had totally forgotten about them. She had forgotten that they were missing. She didn't even remember she had them on. Like they just suddenly appeared.
Exactly.
And she was like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot I was even wearing these things.
I think Betty said in her diary, this was in Kathleen Martin's book, that like one time she picked up the phone to like talk to somebody, and another voice talked at the same time as she was saying like hello, and it said base intelligence.
Oh,
that's cool.
That's
It's
so
good. It's a good one.
scary.
It seems that for alien abductees, they tend to do one of two things. After their experience, they either become really obsessed with their experience and they identify by their experience, sometimes to an unhealthy degree, or they completely repress it.
Yeah.
They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to know anything about it.
Yes.
The interesting thing about Betty is it seems that she has done both of those things at different points in her life.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of stuff that happened later in her life seems to be the stuff that happens to people who have an experience and then they just cannot let go of it.
Yeah.
It's because they've identified with this experience so much that if it stops happening to them, or they don't have a new experience, it doesn't continue happening, they don't feel like themselves anymore, they don't feel special anymore. And I think that happens to so many people, not just alien abductees, but people who have Bigfoot experiences, have psychic experiences, experiences with ghosts. You see it all the time.
Yeah, it's like a need to constantly try to recreate the initial experience, whether that is for themselves or whether it, in some cases, and I'm not saying this is Betty's case at all, but sometimes it's a matter of trying to create a scenario that is as popular or interesting to the general public as their initial one.
Right.
That tends to be a kind of a slippery slope. At least that's one way of looking at it.
It's almost like they have to grasp at straws to find new experiences, which seems to be what happened to Betty at that 1980 UFO conference, where she was laughed off the stage because she was showing pictures of smudges.
Yeah.
I sometimes think of paranormal phenomena as swimming in an ocean. And you can dive down under the water, and sometimes you see beautiful sights, brilliant lights, like crazy entities that exist there. But if you don't come up for air once in a while, you're going to drown. You need someone up top to tug on your air valve and let you know, like, hey, your air's running out. You got to get back up here.
Yeah, you're going too deep.
And I think maybe Barney was that for her.
Sure.
And so when he died, when he passed away, all that she had was that bubble, and probably didn't understand how she really looked after that. That makes me sad.
Yeah.
It's tough. And like the human need for attention.
Yes.
And which is something we all have.
Well, especially when you get so used to it.
Yeah. And you're like, well, this thing happened. And then once all of America's heard the story.
Yeah.
Like, what else?
Yeah. And well, then you start to see.
Compounding it.
You start to see other people telling a very similar story to yours after that. The floodgates have opened. It wasn't, I think it was like very shortly after their television special aired that Travis Walton's Abduction that got turned into a book, Fire in the Sky. She's sitting back watching all this happen, seeing other people telling the same story.
Yeah.
And after a while, it doesn't feel very special anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, there's no way to deny that, like, Betty and Barney Hill's abduction story set the tone for abduction scenarios.
Yeah.
From that point on.
We've played with the alien abduction mythos a little bit. We've done some experiments with it. We've tried to go out and get abducted by aliens. Years ago, 2012, we set off to film a project that we were just calling Planet Weird at the time. Some bits of this project ended up in Hellier. The thing in particular that scared me was when we tried to get abducted by aliens.
Mm-hmm.
We went to Brown Mountain, North Carolina, a place where there are lots of weird stories about strange lights in the sky. We saw the Brown Mountain Lights, did not get abducted, at least the old-fashioned way. So we talked to a friend of ours, Lonnie, who's a hypnotist. And I said, Lonnie, we know about alien abduction regression hypnosis sessions because of Betty and Barney Hill. Is there a way that you can put an idea into someone's head that they have been abducted by aliens with minimal information, see what kind of experience they have, bring them out, and then we can interview them about the experience that they had? His first response was, that's probably very unethical. I don't think that I can do this or should do this. Let me think about it. He came back a few days later and said, you know what? I can do this, but you need to know I can put the idea in your head. I don't know so much about taking it out. Everything about that night was very spooky. We were sitting in this room trying to figure out which one of us was going to go, because he said, I'm only going to take one of you. I'm going to give one of you this journey. I kind of expected, I was running the camera, so I knew it wasn't going to be me.
Who all was there?
It was me. It was Dana. It was our friend Nick Faust and Jason Gowan.
I think that prior to that, too, we had sort of thought that Nick was likely going to be the person that has the experience.
Well, the reason that we thought that, and we didn't tell him this.
Nick's finding out right now.
Nick's finding out on this podcast.
Sorry, Nick.
We wanted Nick to go and have the experience because we thought it was going to be very funny.
He's a very lighthearted person. He's somebody who likely would have had a fun experience, not a scary experience.
And we thought, the idea that we had was that it was going to be an amusing experience. He was going to have a very typical alien abduction experience. Maybe he would come back with some information that he could give us. We could interview him about it. But there was a mood in the room, if you remember.
Yeah.
Before Lonnie showed up, there was a mood in the room where we were very nervous about it.
Yeah, I think everybody chickened out.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, I don't think I want to do this. I actually think I changed my mind. And everyone got really nervous about it.
There's a knock on the door. Lonnie shows up. I only knew him from online.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we were internet friends. And he was nothing like what I expected. Like, I think we were building it up. We thought we were going to meet a man in black, Mm-hmm. I was thinking of stage hypnotist, a guy in a black suit who was going to basically do a magic trick, right? That was not what we got. We got this just super nice dude who just was clean cut, friendly, just looked like a Midwestern dad. And I was like, okay, this can't possibly work. Well, he did the same test, the hypnosis induction test that we did at the beginning of the show. It was basically a tie between Jason and Nick to who was more receptive. And I had told Lonnie, listen, Jason doesn't believe in hypnosis, so I'm really excited to see what happens here. And that challenged Lonnie, and Lonnie went, okay, Jason, you're going to go. And he did a handshake induction. Have any of you guys ever seen a handshake induction?
It's very dramatic.
No.
It looks really weird. It's basically the hypnotist just shakes your hand, and as your hand kind of mid-shake, they grab you by the wrist and take your hand and put it palm down over your face. And so I think it's meant to like disrupt the way our brains normally function when we're meeting someone or we're just kind of walking around in daily life. It's meant to kind of cause you to go like, what the heck's happening? And you instantly are much more susceptible to hypnotic suggestion, which at that point is then close your eyes, drop your head, relax, sit down. So it's a very weird thing to see actually happening in real life. It's very, very spooky and strange.
Yeah.
You're watching someone short circuit.
Yeah.
It feels like you're just watching someone.
Yeah.
Their processor just shuts down.
They just don't know what to do, so they just do exactly what's being told to them.
Yep. You watch the blue screen of death hit them. They are booting
literally.
back up, and as they're booting up, you go straight into the software preferences. He said, you're standing in an outdoor theater, a drive-in theater. You see a strange light in the sky, and you know that you're going to be taken. And I remember looking around at you guys. I remember looking at you and looking at Nick. Nick was working the audio. And I'm like, there's no way. He talked about being taken on the ship. He said the other people that were in the field with him were taken on the ship with him. They were moved along a conveyor belt, and there were experiments that were happening, and he could hear people screaming. And he said, I know they're going to do this to me. They're going to do this to me. I don't want this to happen. I don't want this to happen. He talked about there being a sheet or some sort of a wall between him and what the entities looked like, because Lonnie wanted him to describe what the aliens looked like, and he couldn't see. It was like opaque. Lonnie acknowledges, okay, it sounds like your mind is building a wall, and it won't let you see this thing, so we need to get around that wall. He makes him look behind that wall, and he sees the entities not as gray aliens. It's a description that has stuck with me forever because it gave me cold chills. They moved like they floated through the air. They were almost tentacle-like, the way that they moved, and they had no bones. He specifically said it's like they don't have any bones. And when he said that, like, we all looked at each other and realized, like, oh shit, something's really happening in his head.
Yeah.
At the very least.
It really wasn't anything like we would have expected him to have, and it was very alarming in the moment.
Lonnie had to keep bringing him out of that state because he was getting so worked up that he thought he was going to have some kind of a mental break. And so he'd have to keep pulling him out, and then he'd look at us and he'd be like, do we keep going? The final time that he sent him in was, I think it was the bones, when he was talking about the bones. And Jason became super distressed because they said, they know I'm telling you this. I'm not supposed to be talking about this. They're coming to me next. They're coming to me next. And that's when he had to pull him out.
Oh my God.
He was crying. We were all so upset at what we had seen. He began to have nightmares every night that the abduction scenario was happening. It fits the Betty and Barney Hill story quite a bit. A lot of what was happening to him was being repressed. The things that he could remember were coming out in dreams. He had to keep working with Lonnie to try and get rid of these things. So he did sessions with him on the internet over and over and over to try and get these memories out. The funny thing about Jason's experience was he did not believe in extraterrestrials. I have an interview with him where he talks about, like, no, I don't believe in extraterrestrials. I think if they're out there, they're way, way, way far away. You know, I don't think we've ever met one. You know, his idea is like E.T. He didn't talk about anything that was like a typical gray, which is what you would think you would see with somebody who's really exposed to pop culture.
Yeah.
A couple years later, we interviewed him again, and he could not remember any of the experience. And when I asked him, I was like, do you want to see this? He's like, no, I don't want to know.
Even the sessions with Lonnie afterward or anything like
He's
that?
never
Do you
seen
remember?
them.
No. I mean, the first time he saw them had to have been in Hellier when we put it in Hellier, and he didn't know at the time. So like, he got recognized at the mall. He got recognized at the malls. Oh shit, you're the guy who got abducted in that show. He's like, wait, what? So not only did Jason before this experiment not believe in extraterrestrials, he has an intense fear of extraterrestrials now that did not exist before. Whatever that did permanently changed his mind. His mind is different now than it was before.
How do you feel about it now?
We get shit sometimes because people are like, that was extremely unethical. You shouldn't have done that. Here's the thing, though. We all agreed.
Everyone went into the experiment with, you know, the knowledge that something weird could happen. It was consensual. Everyone was ready. Everyone was ready to participate. So it wasn't like anybody had a fast one pulled over on them or anything like that.
No.
Everyone went in knowing exactly what was going to happen. We just didn't know what the experience was going to be like.
Right. And and again, the only prompts that Lonnie gave was you're in a field, there's an outdoor movie theater screen, there's people with you, you're going to be taken. That was it. Anything else that he said was like, move down the hall, tell us what's there. Nothing was leading. It was just informational. Give us any information about what's happening in there.
Did he pull him out by saying, like, the ship's like dropping you off now? Or was it like, you gotta leave now?
That was how it ended. The way that it ended was, the experience is over. You're back in that field. look around. This is the other spooky thing about this event. He said, look around, tell me what you see. There was a girl that was there in the field that was missing. So to me, it's like, what part of your subconscious is still on that ship?
We would have thought, as you mentioned, that like he would see a traditional gray or some sort of like famous UFO or some sort of famous alien. But his description was so strange and unlike anything that we had heard up to that point. But in recent years, we've read and heard stories about people who have had alien abduction scenarios or they've had experiences with aliens, and the descriptions are they don't have bones or they seem to be like octopus-like.
They seem to float. They seem to float
floating.
through. I mean, that's an old description from Fae lore. I don't know what to think about those experiences. All I know is that after that, we decided to do them again for Hellier. Really spooky stuff came out of Carl. He saw things during that hypnosis session that we later saw the next day. He saw that pyramid.
He saw a giant fountain.
He saw a fountain that we went to.
We didn't run into a giant praying mantis.
Thank
But that
God.
was also in there.
There was a giant praying mantis. Another very common alien abductee report
Yeah.
are the mantis beings.
Yeah. That's a very common trope almost in abduction scenarios.
What people who watched Hellier 2 don't know is that Lonnie also did a hypnosis session on you, Connor.
Yeah, I did.
What did you think about that experience?
I thought, because it was a little bit different, the intention wasn't for me to get abducted by aliens. The intention that Lonnie set forward for us was to basically try and see if we can head to some sort of astral consciousness plane that's different than what we're on currently to peek for more answers in this like crazy paranormal mystery
Yeah.
that we were trying
We should also
trying
know
to solve.
Lonnie said it's not that he didn't do it, it's that he would not do that experiment again.
Yeah.
I can't imagine why.
He had to clean up afterwards for a while.
Yeah, for sure.
And so with mine, it was like, all right, we're going to hypnotize you and we're going to send you somewhere and you're going to poke around and see if there's some other force out there that's willing to like give you answers. And so I sat down and you and Carl were around me and Dana and Tyler went and sat in the other room and we were just in a living room in a comfortable couch, and he didn't do a hand induction, but he sort of gently lulled me into a trance state. And you remember what popped into my head?
I remember some of it. I mostly remember the voice you were speaking in.
Oh yeah,
because that was scary.
It was very
you had a scary
low,
voice.
very, very quiet.
I'd never heard that come out of you before.
It was hard to hear you. It was like
I was
even
probably sleepy.
Yeah.
afterwards you were really, really tired, and it was very strange.
Yeah, and so he's like, "We're gonna go to this place," and for some reason, the place that I entered to walk around was the Peach's Castle in Super Mario 64.
I love that is your safety place.
I guess it is. I mean, that wasn't there, but so we're like, I'm wandering around the castle and I'm trying different doors and I'm looking for stuff for this terrifying mystery that we're trying to solve. And I remember I entered this one room and there was all these bookshelves lined like it was a library, which is not in the game. And there was a book on a table alone.
Yeah.
And I walked up to the book and I started to see some pictures of men's faces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that was a valuable experience?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like something you want to do every day.
Yeah.
But it's like a mental roller coaster trip, right?
You saw pictures in the book that were relevant to our case. We probably shouldn't get into them,
Yeah,
but
just in case.
but you
never know.
saw things that were relevant to the case, and you brought them back with you. What does that mean to you?
It means that I could remember, to me, it seemed like I could remember a dream really, really well.
Yeah.
And you can never remember dreams well.
Yeah.
And the question will always persist, just probably like it does for Jason, but his was a bad dream.
Yes.
Did my mind create that dream, or was my mind somewhere else?
That's the scary thing about hypnosis. We also know, because here's the thing, I found a lot of value in all of the experiments that we did. I mean, it certainly seems like when Carl went under and had the same experience you did, he had some kind of precognitive image of something we were only going to see the next day that we didn't even know was a thing. We didn't know it existed. That, to me, is pretty stunning. We've done other experiments with hypnosis that we'll save for another show that show some of the weirder physiological effects that you can cause. Because there's people who've undergone surgery under hypnosis and didn't feel pain.
This episode is brought to you by the Newkirk Museum of the Paranormal Membership Program. Become a museum member and take part in live paranormal investigations. Receive Dana's Magic of the Month subscription box, access in-depth artifact case files, and gain access to hundreds of hours of exclusive content available only to members. To become a member, visit patreon.com/paramuseum.
We don't really know how hypnosis really works.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The scary thing is there's a dark side to that. If you go back to the late 80s and the early 90s, regression hypnosis sessions were used a lot in people who believed that they were satanically ritually abused. There were famous books written about this that are entirely false. There were narratives that started to emerge from people that they had been abused in like daycare centers by family members, and people went to jail. People had lives ruined over objectively false memories.
Wow.
It was so much so that the FBI literally had to look into these cases to prove or disprove that there was a massive organization of Satanists that were doing this to people.
Whoa.
It's called the Satanic Panic.
The idea of regression hypnosis has that dark side to it,
Mhm.
Yeah.
where there are objectively false memories that come out of people, and they can become fixated on these memories, and then they are just as real to them as anything else.
Yeah.
How do we know that what Betty and Barney Hill experienced was objectively what their brains told them they experienced?
So, because that's what Dr. Simon said in that book, and I loved that idea, where like the quote was, because I wrote it down: hypnosis reveals the truth as the subject perceives it,
Yeah.
and that may or may not match objective reality.
Mm-hmm.
Because your memories aren't reliable either necessarily.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like it's a teleporter to go back in time
Right.
to that literal moment again. It's your mind, what it remembers of it.
Mm-hmm.
Aliens definitely weren't mean before this, though, like in pop culture.
Right. The
They were kind of
contactees.
friendly. They were having a good time.
Yeah, they were just trying to steal people's pantyhose and take their dogs to space and make them pancakes.
Yeah.
Like those are actual all real contactee stories from back
Uh-huh.
in the day.
40s and 50s. And
Yeah.
This was 61, and it just like changed the tone.
Mm-hmm.
And that tone slowly grew up through the 90s. And then in the 90s, there was no such thing as a good alien.
No,
I mean, the X-Files played a big part in
for
that.
sure.
But it was all like government conspiracy. We're working with the extraterrestrials. They're taking us to breed with us. That's when you started to get a lot of the extraterrestrial breeding, alien hybrid stuff. Interestingly enough, 1957, Brazil, Antonio Villas Boas, he claimed that the aliens that took him, they knocked him out with a gas. And then when he woke up on the ship, there was this like beautiful alien woman who engaged in intercourse with him
The babe alien.
and then rubbed her belly and pointed to the sky as if to say, I'm going to raise your baby in space, but genuinely felt relieved. This is the funny part about his story, is that the woman looked like the hot alien babe
Yeah.
was almost disgusted by him and was happy to have been done with that task. And he said it made him feel like he was just a good breeding stock. It made him feel less
You didn't
than.
even have to say that.
No, it embarrassed him. He
Yeah.
felt bad about it, like he had been used. So that was out there. That experience had happened. That like weird I'm banging aliens
The
thing
space
happened.
baby might be out there too. They'd be what, in their late 60s now?
Hey, who knows? Maybe they're out there. If you're listening, Space Baby, if you're listening, please grant us an exclusive interview about what it was like being raised by a single mother on a spaceship.
Yeah, just title the subject space. I'm the space baby.
I am Space
I
Baby.
am the space baby.
So we're left with the question, what do you think actually happened?
I believe that they saw a ship. I believe that they followed it. I believe that they saw something physically in front of them, and I believe that they lost time and their memories were taken from them. Everything after that, I think, is up for debate. But I do believe that their initial experience was real. I genuinely do.
What bothers me about the Hill case now is realizing that the guy who suggested they get regression hypnosis was in the CIA. Their friend who suggested he get hypnosis was in the CIA.
That's very, very strange.
There's something about that tweaks me.
Yeah, as it should.
And then I think, okay, the people that Betty and Barney saw were dressed in uniforms. They were wearing hats. Didn't one of them hold out a hand to Barney and put him to sleep?
Yeah, that was how he initially fell asleep.
Was
in
it
the
how?
car.
I mean, that
There
to
were,
me,
like 3 on each side of the car.
yeah.
And
Is
they
that
just
like
walked
chloroform?
up to their car on their legs.
Yeah.
Yes. Was it chloroform? Did someone just put him out?
Did they drug them? Yeah.
Did they drug them? Did they hypnotize them? Did they do hypnotism on them to make them go, this is what you saw? Like the other detail is keep watching.
Yeah.
When they told Barney, keep watching.
Yeah. And it was as if he I think described it as like he physically couldn't stop. Like he was so locked in, like it was like, I think it was this idea of the frequency, and also that there were buzzing and beeping sounds
Sure.
that at one point they believed left marks on the back of the car. Like
Yeah.
there was strange frequencies, strange sounds that were used. It's all very interesting and strange.
Going back to the Antonio Villas-Boas case, that only happened 3 or 4 years earlier than them. There's been quite a bit written at this point to suggest that man was messed with by the CIA, that he was put to sleep, that they did experiments on him and then let him go with this crazy story that you've been abducted by aliens. Or maybe they don't give him a story at all. Maybe that's just what they think, because what else could it possibly be? And we have evidence, we have actual evidence that the United States government has paid people, particularly from the CIA, to infiltrate UFO groups, to stoke fear and confusion about flying saucers and about alien abduction within UFO groups, and spread false narratives within those groups in order potentially to cover up strange things that they're testing in the sky, maybe experiments that they're doing on people. I realize how conspiratorial that sounds, but there's those elements of their case that bother me.
Sure.
Is the connection, number one, to the CIA
Sketchy.
saying, go get regression hypnosis done on you.
Which is, again, where most of the narrative came from.
Apparently that friend was also like there while they talked. They called the Air Force. He was like their family friend.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Barney was like the best man at this guy's wedding.
Yeah.
Sure.
They were good friends.
If there's anything I've learned from nearly 25 years in the paranormal, doing this full time for a decade, people are the scariest of anything. And they're capable of some really scary stuff. So I lean towards the idea that they experienced something. Their brains told them it was one thing, but maybe it was something else. I don't know. Maybe there are more clues about what actually happened in these pieces of the dress.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if we'll ever know the truth.
I'm a believer in aliens.
I am too. I think,
And-
is it safe to say we're all
I think we
believers
all-
in it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
So it's like, if that's frankly, what it all comes down to is something happened to this couple. Possibly the strongest evidence, like Dana was saying, is that they didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And this actually was supposed to be a secret.
Yeah.
And it was like a breach of trust
Yeah.
that we're even talking about this right now.
Yeah. A huge breach of trust.
Yeah. So that's a major in the pro category for me. And so is the initial sighting, Air Force reports, and I am team star map. I think that's so cool.
It is
It
so
is
cool.
so cool. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
The star map
So-
is definitely one of the coolest things about
Yeah.
the case.
I love that, like, today we can still look at their original drawings.
Yeah.
Like, right, you know what I mean? Like, of the ship itself, of the star map. Like, we can still see those things
Yeah.
and see, like, the little details. I love that those exist.
I mean, the dress, to me, the idea that there's weird stuff on it that has touched it around places that the extraterrestrials would have touched, and they can't figure out what it is.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me.
It is.
This dress, Betty Hill's dress,
Yeah.
is probably the best piece of evidence that something genuinely strange happened to her, and it still exists.
Yes.
This dress is very analogous to one of the footprints from Bluff Creek,
Yeah.
from the Patterson-Gimlin film. But the fact that there are so many theories, there are so many stories, and there are so many personal experiences, like, I can point to that image of the leader scaring the shit out of me as a child. And that was one of the things that made me interested in all things strange, was that book and that image specifically that gave me nightmares. All of those things combined are what make Betty Hill's dress a haunted object.
The Haunted Objects podcast is hosted by Greg and Dana Newkirk, produced by Connor J. Randall, with photography directed by Carl Pfeiffer, and features exclusive artifacts from the Newkirk Museum of the Paranormal. To learn more about the artifacts featured in this episode, take part in live interactive experiments, and enjoy exclusive Haunted Objects content, become a museum member at patreon.com/paramuseum. This has been a Planet Weird production.
Could you describe where you have arrived?
There's red carpet. Walking up the stairs. Looks like an old game I would play.
Well, that's very cool.